Whether you're cutting your drawer box parts at the table saw or at the chop saw, one thing for sure is they have to be dead on, accurate, and square. In this two-part video, I'm going to show you how I cut my dovetail joint at the table saw. The end results are beautiful, strong, and fantastic. All right, so I've got my bevel gauge, and I love this thing. There's other companies that make these, but this just divides all these degrees, you know, up to 50 degrees and even in quarter degrees. So really fantastic. So I've got my bevel gauge set at 10, 9, 8 degrees, right? And I've went ahead and marked one of these with a line, and I personally don't like that scribed line on dovetails, so I'm just doing it on the sample, and I determined that distance simply like that. Some of these are flat on the bottom, you can just drop it down. This one does not, but pretty easy to set, right? So we've got that, got a layout, and I just, you know, you want to go off center of your board, so I like using a scribe. Let me grab that. And so with that, I can determine the width, which is slightly over 1/8 inch, which is the kerf of the saw blade, to make these marks, and then transfer that to 8 degrees. All right, so you'll notice I have this auxiliary fence. This is for the tails with an 8-degree cut, sacrificial fence. It keeps everything stable and minimizes tear out, right? And then this one is for the pins, which we'll use second. Basically the same thing. Has these quarter bolts that attach to my miter gauge. And this block, it's just a piece of Baltic birch with sandpaper on the back, so it grips really well. And as we're doing our cuts, this is 90 degrees, and we can index right against that stop. So you'll notice with this particular sample, I can use one stop and a spacer to cut all aspects of both tails. So let's check that depth. I know it's good. I already checked it. That looks beautiful. That right there is exactly what I'm after. Perfect engagement. All right, now that we're happy with the sample, we can go on to the real part. Cutting both sides. I can remove the spacer and cut the center. Now, I just about forgot to add, this is a special ground blade to 8 degrees made by Forrest. The link will be in the description. There's all the tails cut, right? This is easily cleaned up with a chisel. And the scribe mark that most people put makes it really easy to index your chisel. I get that, but this is so small, it's easy to index on a flat part here, twist the chisel in and clean that up. On this particular project, I have 2 different drawer heights, so I'm cutting the tails on these other parts. Took a little bit of time, 35 minutes, and actually honed all my chisels. I had to reshape one, had a few chips, but I keep them pretty sharp and try to keep them honed rather than having to sharpen them all the time, which these are so minimal, it's gonna slice effortless through that little bit, but I'll clean all that up on all of these and then we'll move on to the pins, yeah? Setting up vertical, you know, I got a stool here, and so I can just easily whittle through those. And the trick here is this low raking light. So you can see this little thing right there is really magnified because of the shadow. So if you've followed me on Instagram for very long, you'll know that I'm always talking about low raking light angle, this oblique light, which just magnifies any little discrepancy and makes it a lot easier to see. Got all the tail boards cut. We're gonna cut the pin board now. I've got the sample piece in my vise. It's slightly proud of my workbench. And here's my sample Tableboard, and this one has a scribed line, but even if you didn't have a scribed line with a shoulder, I should add, you could put a piece of tape right at that intersection, right? And just that small amount will allow you to butt right into the back of that board, thusly creating that index that you need. Then I have this funky little square that I made. I can line that up perfectly. Now, I think this is really important. I don't use a marking knife for these. I find it cumbersome. This is a 0.3 millimeter lead and works fantastic. I can get in there and make those marks. And then when I go to cut, just leave that pencil mark. Even though it is tiny, I leave it behind, ensuring a nice tight fit. Of course, if you're doing this by hand, the scribe line is ideal for starting the handsaw. Me scusi, I'm kind of in the way there, but essentially what I've done is change the blade to a flat grind and checking the blade for square. All right, so I've got the other fence on there. And technically you could just use the same fence, you know, just scoot it over. And I actually moved it over to get out of these curves because they tend to get wallowed a little bit, and I want a nice zero clearance there. So now we have to set this to 8 degrees. So I put it close, going off the scale on the miter gauge. And then of course we're gonna use this dude, 8 degrees. And I probably shouldn't go off of this because this may or not be parallel to this area. I should have checked that when I made that, but I didn't. Well, I don't remember if I did, so I'm not gonna take a chance. I'm gonna go off the teeth here, and I can raise this up. Let me see, how about, quarter-inch material, quarter-inch drill bit. There we go. And go off the teeth there. That looks pretty good. Miter gauge says 8 degrees. So yeah, let's check this another way. Put that against the carbide teeth. Something parallel here. Yep, that looks pretty good. 8 degrees. So here I'm setting the blade height. All right, I think the blade height is about right. Might have to come up just a tad. We'll check that in a minute. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set this up again to make these cuts. Now I can only make 2 of these cuts because of this angle, right? So I'm gonna make like the left side of this cut and the left side of this cut. We'll do both of those, and then we'll have to rotate this fence and do the other 8-degree angle. When I'm running the parts, of course, I'm just gonna run all of this one side, then rotate the fence and do the rest. Now, this could be a good place for a dado blade, but my dado blade does not cut true flat bottoms, so we're gonna nibble this out with the saw blade. Remember that spacer that we used on the tailboard? Well, here it goes. The same spacer is going to work perfectly. Here's my cut. Make the first cut, move the spacer, make the second cut. Man, I apologize. I do not know what happened. Maybe my tripod was against the table saw, but I'm going to skip this. It'll make sense in a future video. All right, I went ahead and notched some of that out, and then I rotated the fence, and let's make a kerf, and then we'll set up to make the other edge of this cut. Okay, again, I deleted the video. It was just too shaky, but you can see the kerf there. I'm gonna go somewhere like that. And then again, we can use a spacer, but we won't be able to use this stop. We'll have to move that. But but we will be able to use a spacer. So I don't want to lose my place of this stop, so I have another block with sandpaper on it. I can put this in place, knowing that I can precisely locate this first stop exactly where it originally was. Something like right there. Oh, actually I need to start here, yeah. So I'll start there, put a stop block, and we can move the spacer block, make the other cut. All right, here's that process again. So no rabbit or shoulder or scored mark, no problem. Just line this tape up here. All right. This is our sample piece. This is the inside. So I'm just going to lightly clamp this here. Right? Something like that. And I can use this guy to push that down. Flush with my bench. It should just be up a tad, perfect. And this tape will line that up. Look at that, boom. And the reason I got the tape out of the way is so I could line up the sides now. Or top and bottom, I should say. Flush on each side. And then we can mark that. 0.3 millimeter lead. This one you can't get in all the way. I just mark it here, then carry those lines over. Those lines get transferred to this side anyway, so they don't even really need to go that way. We'll bring those up square and start making our cuts. With all the dovetails cut, pins and tails, I'm starting to fit these, and I made them just a little bit tight. I'm going to show you a trick that I do to get a really good fit. So first of all, see if this shows up. But I put a small cut here and here, and I back bevel that slightly, but not all the way on the end because it'll show. So just a little, that just helps it start. And that sharp edge would squeegee the glue, so that chamfer helps. Now as I start to put that in, it starts, but it's a little bit tight. So rather than trying to pair anything, because I know the fit will be good, we're gonna make this a little bit thinner simply by sanding it. Now I've got 180 grit on that belt sander, so it's not taking off a bunch. It's already pretty smooth. It blends with whatever else I've already done. Let's see how that looks. So this is the inside, and also the inside. Better. So that's starting to go in. That's a really good fit. Almost a little too tight. If you go too tight and these are large, then that can crack. So, and you need a little bit of space for glue, because you can get these to fit really nice, and then when you add glue, things won't go together. So you don't want that surprise. So I sanded it one more time, just a little bit, and this is a 180 grit on this sander, so I'm not taking off very much at all. And essentially, you can see on this pin board that by making this thinner, since this is wedge shaped, it's going to allow just a little bit of slack, and that serves two purposes. A, your piece is going to fit, and two, it cleans up any of this little area that may have chipped out slightly. So it's a little trick that I do just to get these to fit and clean things up at the same time. And see, that would press in place just by hand. Avoid the urge to use a bigger hammer. Here's what I love about Tablesaw dovetails. Narrow pins, but super clean results. Bit of a side note here. So the two bigger drawers, those are actually rollouts. These smaller ones, these are actually drawers. That's why it has a finished front. Now, I don't know if this will show up. Yeah, see that? So this little extra piece, I just pinned it in place, and the thickness of this piece is the same as one of these handles, right? So you can see I couldn't very well make those cuts with this handle in place. So I just put this temporary piece in place. Now, when these drawer fronts were thicker, I sliced and saved this front piece so that now this can get glued onto here, thusly creating this half-blind dovetail look. Then, with this piece removed, the handle will go on, and then I can shape that handle.